Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, making my return this week. Thank you to my co-host this week, Frank Pisani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good.
Thanks
Happy to
to
have you back.
thanks to you and Cam filling in last week when internet troubles took me out of commission at the last minute. Incredibly frustrating, but like knock on wood, my internet has been much more stable this week after a couple of rocky weeks there. Today, we are going to be talking a little bit about Peacemaker, which is nearing its finale. I'm going to be talking about the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection. Frank sat down and played some of the Cassandra missions in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And I just wrapped up my Life is Strange Remastered playthrough, which you can find on the YouTube channel as it releases over the next couple weeks. But before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping. You can check out That Bond Show, our weekly Saturday podcast, limited run series over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where we're sitting down talking about all that good Bond stuff. This most recent episode was Diamonds Are Forever, which was a terrible movie, but it was a lot of fun because Logan and I actually got to watch it together when he was out here visiting before we did our actually, I guess it was right after we did our big Disney trip. And then this coming week will be Live and Let Die, which Frank joined Logan and I on, as well as Cameron. So it was a big old 4-person one talking about Live and Let Die. So go check that out every Saturday on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. You can also find a lot of our best of lists up on the channel, as well as Frank did a video version of his that if it's not up by the time you're listening to this, it'll be up very shortly, I'm sure. We also have another limited run series on Fridays that you can catch called Friday Night Dying Light, where Cameron is going through Dying Light 2 with a new episode released every Friday night. And for some reason, he decided to pick a Friday Night Lights theme to do the podcast. So clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose, all that stuff. I don't know why that was what like triggered in his brain, but that's I mean, I guess as I tweeted out like originally, they both have the word light, so there you go. That's how he landed on that idea. And then lastly, I want to give a shout out to Jazz, our friend and fellow nerd who made a game. It is a dice game with retro arcade themed elements called Retrograde. Her company Resonim is making it, and it hits Kickstarter this Tuesday on the 15th. And she basically wanted us to give it a little shout out, give it a little love. It is the first game she actually worked on. She's very excited for it. So check out the description for the episode where you can find a link to the Kickstarter, which, as I said, will go live on this Tuesday. So yeah, shout out to Jazz out there making moves, making games, very literally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah. Lastly, if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. All that housekeeping out of the way. Frank, kick it off. What are your thoughts on Peacemaker?
So yeah, honestly, I've been excited to talk about this show. It's incredible. Like I'm honestly kind of blown away by like how good it actually is, or how much I'm actually enjoying my time with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it started coming out in January while we were kind of gone and busy on our trip. So then by the time I even got back, it took me forever to get caught up as I was getting caught up on other stuff. So this Tuesday of this week, I finally watched all 6 episodes that were out. And then on Thursday, I watched the episode that just came out this week. So I'm all caught up. But it is like top tier James Gunn. Like he wrote all the episodes, and I think it is like so perfect that he was attached to this, because it definitely would not be as good if he wasn't involved. But it is written so well, where it's funny, it has the violence, it has like some horror random parts, it also has like a ton of heart and character, and like I really believe in like a lot of the things that are happening, even though sometimes it's really goofy and zany and people have superpowers and there's super villains, and like judo master is like a part of the show that everybody really loves. And like James Gunn is so good at pulling all these like super D tier list things from the DC Comics universe. And one of the things that's been kind of a fun part of the show is every week he's made it a point to canonize something like super obscure and trivial, but because it's in the Peacemaker show, it becomes canon of the universe. So
Okay.
like no spoilers, but in one of the episodes, he canonizes Kite Man in the DCEU.
Nice.
So Kite Man is a character.
Excellent.
Um, and
Standout
then there's
from the Harley Quinn animated series, of course, Kite Man.
oh yeah, in the couple episodes I've seen of the Harley Quinn show, it was really good, and Kite Man was funny in that show, and
Yeah.
hopefully, like maybe we could get something like similar to some of the things in that show. That would be really funny.
I mean,
Honestly, the Harley Quinn show. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I've seen all the Harley Quinn show that's out so far, the 3 seasons that are out, and it's phenomenal stuff. They
Oh
do a
yeah.
great job with it. It's an incredible series. I'm glad they're, like, continuing to make more, of it, because yeah, it is just a ton of fun, and it is, like, super, D-list stuff, but because it was, animated and kind of probably flying a little bit under the radar, they're just, like, ruthless and crazy, and it was like I mean, tying it into this conversation, I'll say, like the first episode of the Harley Quinn animated series, like features incredibly brutal violence of like
Oh yeah.
Harley like bashing like mobsters like heads with her mallet and stuff like that, and you see like a bunch of gore and stuff, but it's in cartoon form, which made it a little bit more palatable. Versus like I watched like the first like episode and a half of Peacemaker and was like, this is just gonna be like this is too tense for me. I don't want, like, I'm constantly afraid that like like somebody's just gonna get their head blown off or something like that, and I'm not interested in just kind of like like waiting for that to happen. um so I ducked out of that one, but I've been hearing great things about it, so I'm really glad you're enjoying it. So I'll throw it back over to you.
Oh, no, definitely, and I think going back to Harley Quinn for a second, I think that's a good kind of comparison for what this is, even though this is live action. Like, I've only seen a couple episodes of the Harley Quinn show, and that is more violent because it is a cartoon, at least in the parts of the we got I don't know if the finale really turns up the violence, which it might, but, like, it does pop up all the way through, and, like but I was actually surprised because I really thought that was gonna be, like, the entire show. I just thought it was gonna be, like, dumb action and jokes and just murder all the time, and I'm actually surprised that it's, like, ends up being so much more than that. And then occasionally there is just like some crazy action scene or like is some violence that gets turned up for like a minute. And then it just kind of goes back to being like characters talking to each other and like doing their different things. And like it literally is like they're just a black ops team trying to carry out a mission. And some of the people in the group are like Amanda Waller's people from the movie, like Steve Agee, and I
Mhm.
forget the actress's name, but like the blonde woman who plays Night Court. And when they like the first
Hardcore.
episode Hardcore, yes, you're right, sorry. Um,
I was like, Night Court. No,
yeah,
that was a series from like the 80s. Also,
I was talking
I
about that
I
on
just really
Friday,
want.
so I think it's in my mind.
Oh, there you go. I just want to correct myself. There've only been 2 seasons of Harley Quinn so far, but they like pack so much like story and stuff into them that it has felt like more, and I've really enjoyed it. But yeah, Harley Quinn, great series. But yes, they're like the characters that they brought in from kind of the like Amanda Waller side of things of the Suicide Squad, I thought was like a nice like, oh, okay, yeah, this adds just like a little bit more legitimacy to it, especially like obviously having seen the first episode. I won't spoil it here, but like obviously another one of those characters is like like has another connection to Amanda Waller, that's kind of like introduced right out the gate.
Yeah, yeah, and but that's also what I think is so interesting about the show is not even just that specific dynamic, but each of the characters has like their own story and thing that's going on, and then it's interesting to see them be part of like this larger team, and then have like conflicts that arises and different things that happen because there's other things that get revealed about other people later, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it is like interesting that again it is like there's like drama, there's heart, there's character, there's comedy, there's fight, it's everything, but it does everything like exceedingly well, and I think it chooses its right moments of like when to do what. Like when are we going to be funny? When are we going to be heartfelt? When are we going to be violent? Like and just crazy. And like that's why I was surprised because I just thought it's kind of like what I thought about like going into like Boba Fett. What I thought that was going to be like of like okay, this is just going to be like an action like tons of like he's this murderous badass from a movie, right? Like and in this it's like oh we're actually going to take a look at like who is Peacemaker and what is his life like outside of being Peacemaker for like when these missions are happening and like oh it's sad like and
Hmm.
why he's sad and like why is he sad and like even getting to meet his dad and the time you spend with his dad and like his dad is horrendous and it really explains like why is Peacemaker the way that Peacemaker is, in like a much so much of it's just like so much interesting character development in terms of like we're explaining why he is the way he is, and then he's also growing and changing and trying to fight that and be different. Like he wants to be a better person, but he knows no better because
Mhm.
his dad is just like this horrendous person that they really turn the dial up on. Because even I think the dad's in the first episode and he's
Yep.
already out the gate is like crazy, and then they really turn the dial up on the dad to the point where I was talking to a friend of mine and he was like, I think I have changed my opinion of Robert Patrick. And I was like, that's he's just that good at acting, though. I don't think he's actually like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's I saw something basically making the rounds on Twitter about like somebody, either I think it was either James Gunn like quote tweeting a tweet or something, but it was like somebody had interviewed Robert Patrick, and Robert Patrick was like James Gunn is giving me the opportunity to play this character who is the father to Peacemaker. Peacemaker's an asshole, and the father has to be like an even bigger asshole than that to explain why Peacemaker's an asshole. Yeah, hell yeah, I'm gonna jump at that kind of opportunity. And yeah, I mean, like I mean, as somebody who like I love seeing Robert Patrick pop up in things here and there over the years. Obviously, most iconically, of course, Terminator 2. So then seeing him like pop up in other things and being like, "Oh, it's the T-1000," is always a joy and delight. And yeah, like I definitely enjoyed like the little bit of him that you get in that first episode, and he is immediately like the disappointed father, who is just like completely dismissive, doesn't care about his son at all, apart from like using him as a tool, as a weapon, and all that kind of stuff. um so that's a great element. I do have to ask, do you like watch the opening credits sequence each time?
So this is something I did want to bring up because I don't
You
like
don't, you do skip through it. I remember.
totally, and I
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember that dropped. Like, or I like, yeah, the episodes dropped, I think, either the week we went to or the week before we went to Disneyland. And I remember they dropped the like opening credits like as a standalone thing while we were there. I remember like seeing it like across my timeline in the hotel room and like
yeah,
checking it out for a little bit and being like, this is really dumb.
same. No, that was my same kind of reaction, and I remember seeing, like, the first thing I forget if I saw what part of the intro was and then saw James Gunn's, like, take on it, or if I saw James Gunn's take and then what it was, but I remember him being like, "I wanna defeat the skip intro button, I wanna make an intro that nobody ever wants to skip," and then I see what it is, and I'm like, "I don't think it's a bad intro, but it's, like it's dumb, and I get it's dumb fun, and it's this, like, serious characters, and they're all being really funny and goofy and stupid," but it's a thing of, like, I don't need to watch it 10 times,
Yeah.
especially because, like I told you, I watched 6 episodes back to back. So, yeah, I watched it the first time. I'll get the first episode, I watched it all the way through, and then every single time I was like, "Skip intro, skip intro, skip intro," and it's like to me, I was like, "If you really wanted to defeat that button, change the intro every week. Like, make it something that obviously that's more work and more money and yada yada, but it's like, that what I think is how you defeat that button is if it's something interesting and different and everybody wants to watch it every week and see what it's gonna be, but
Yeah.
instead it doesn't change. It's literally just that same canned animation. The only thing I will say is that I think he did a good job of including that as part of the show to the point where, like, there's, like, one of the later episodes starts, like, super sad, and then it cuts into that super happy intro, and I think that was, like, a really deliberate choice of, like, the show is happier in the beginning, and then things get more real and more sad, even though it's still funny and campy the whole way through, and so that, like, that hit of, like, going from one extreme to the other, like, 0 to 60 was, like, really funny in,
Hmm.
like, its own weird, jokey kinda way. And I feel like that was another one of those like deliberate choices where I think he really thought like everything feels like so well thought out and connected and everything makes like sense.
Yeah, I think it's always fascinating, like having those, like, I mean, obviously, like the like opening credits like theme song kind of thing is significantly less of a thing these days compared to like when I was growing up. But like going back and watching something like The Office or something like Scrubs, and like they have such like cheery opening theme songs, or Community, and then like you have a cold open in one of those episodes that like does deal with like a serious thing or ends on like a down note or something like that, and then it like goes into that and it's just like, well, this is weird. Or I guess like something like another one that like example that comes to mind is like Chuck,
Yeah.
which like the opening theme for that is like short skirt and long jacket from whichever, from Cake, I think was
Cake.
the
Yeah.
band.
Yeah.
Um, like later on in the series, seasons like 3, 4, 5, like tragic stuff is happening, and like people in Chuck's lives are, are dying and stuff like that. And like an episode will be like, it starts with dealing with the aftermath of like the end of the last episode and like really sad dour and then like it comes in and like you do and it's just like, this didn't work at all for the tone shift. But I do appreciate that, like in a more condensed thing, that yeah, this certainly was a deliberate thing. Like for me, I think a lot of it is like, I don't care about like the hair metal rock of the
Yeah.
like late 70s 80s kind of stuff, which is what that song is pulled from. So just like, it's
And
like,
that's the soundtrack to, like, most of the show, because that's, like, what
exactly,
Peacemaker's into as a guy, so
yeah.
that's just what is, like, a continual theme.
Yeah. It's like it it especially worked in Guardians of the Galaxy because like he picked such notable like songs, and like hearing them in the context of like space is like a fun gag kind of thing. I mean, it's fascinating that like, yeah, Peter Quill and Peacemaker just have the exact same sense of taste in music, and that's just James Gunn's taste in music.
E exactly.
Um, and then with Guardians of the Galaxy 2, like he went with some more obscure songs, but they fit thematically with that story so much better. So it's like, okay, like this soundtrack isn't as much of a just like greatest hits banger kind of thing, but like it still works really well in the context of that movie. And I imagine, I mean, like based on kind of the little bits and pieces I've seen, like he's definitely playing with that element again here in Peacemaker. In particular, what like the where I kind of ended off in episode 2 is like he's bonding over a woman that he's like kind of taken hostage over the band Cinderella, and I'm like, all right, sure, yep, go
Eh,
for it, enjoy
I
your
wanted
80s rock or whatever.
I wanted to give that a shout out because I went to a record store here in town in Austin, and they had Cinderella records in the new, not the new releases, but the new, like, just got this in the store. So I was like, somebody has been watching Peacemaker and was like, people are going to come in and ask for Cinderella. So let's stock it.
There you go, nice.
So I thought that was funny. But yeah, like that's the thing, is like, it's like Motley Crue and Cinderella and all these other like early like 70s and 80s like rock and hair metal and stuff. And then there's also like, at one point in one of the episodes, somebody talks about the song Pumped Up Kicks, and then the credits for that episode is like a metal cover of Pumped Up Kicks, and
Yeah,
like that was
it's
actually a really cool like cover.
yeah, it was that same episode that like
Oh, okay, yeah.
the wife or the girl in that conversation or whatever is like, you like Pumped Up Kicks, do you know what that song is about? It's about like gun violence or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's always weird how like catchy and like happy on that on the radio Pumped Up Kicks is. It's like you listen to the lyrics, like this is a dark ass song.
Oh, definitely. And like that was a cool like credit song, and just another way he used the music in like a really cool way, because that's like the soundtrack for the show is great. And I think it's used in such like a cool and unique way, which is like you were saying, is kind of like what we'd almost expect from James Gunn at this point.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what goes back to my point of like everything just feels super well thought out and planned out, and everything feels like real, even though like I said, there's insane dumb stuff happening sometimes, and then like even with Peacemaker and then other people and powers and whatever, like it is the DCEU still. And that's also funny when like other comic characters just get referenced, like Aquaman and Batman and Superman, but it's from Peacemaker's perspective when he's like making fun of them.
Mhm.
And like it's funny that they let him like do a lot of these things. And from what I forget if he said it or someone else said it, but basically he had like free reign to just kind of do whatever. And I
Mhm.
think that is like perfect what you need to do for him, because the fact that like he goes crazy with some stuff. And like another person, I think this is somebody on the Kind of Funny, one of the screencasts said like, this Peacemaker is all the stuff that got him fired from Disney.
Mhm.
Is like, but it's like personified in like a show. And that is totally right, where there is just some hardcore things in there, and even just some like filthy things and whatever, but it's all funny. It feels real. It feels like um it just, the real is just kind of the best way I can think I can describe it, because like it's just this group of people who are like bonding while on this Black Ops mission, and they all have their own things going on. But because they're like Black Ops team members, and even Steve Agee is just like the guy in the chair, they're all like super lonely. And now they kind of all have that thing of like they're in a group and they belong. And then there's also like, but then you have like some characters' backstories and other things going on with them, where like turmoil is then implemented, and you always, but like I feel bad, and I'm like, no, I don't want these things to happen to this group. I actually care about this group. And that was kind of my point when I was bringing up the characters brought in from the movie is because not only does that help kind of tie it all together, it's like in the movie, I never cared about any of those people in the first or the second movie. Like I cared more about the heroes, but not or the anti-heroes or villains or whatever you want to call it. But I didn't care about the people in the chair like Steve Agee and like Hardcore and all that.
Yeah.
But the fact that like he actually got me to care about these people, and like even with explaining just little bits about them, and even not even without having to go through like here's the flashback of their entire life. It's just like people just having conversations and saying things. And even Economos' Steve Agee really grew on me, where like Peacemaker is just a huge bully against him for so much. And then when they finally kind of get that, like, it's like the Step Brothers, did we just become best friends moment? Because they both love a really obscure hair metal band from like the 70s.
Mhm.
And it's like, and it's not as just direct as the Step Brothers thing, but it's that first step towards like them actually becoming okay. And then that just kind of continues to evolve, is like, and I'm like, it feels like real, like, and it's just these funny little character and heart moments that are kind of like you get in like Guardians of the Galaxy. Like he made us care about this ragtag group of people in space. And now to me, I'm like, he made me care about this ragtag group of like D tier. Another person on the Kind of Funny podcast said like these are the expendables of the Suicide Squad.
Mhm.
So it's like, so these are like F tier characters basically, because the Suicide Squad is already like D tier mostly.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's like that, but the fact that I actually care about a lot of them and the drama and things that are happening, I was actually like impressed by, because I didn't expect that. And not to just like hit against Boba Fett, but that's what made me realize that like with the finale of Boba Fett, like I didn't care about a ton of the people in his group, or like what they like the actual people. But then now I'm like, man, Peacemaker has this group of people, and I care about all of these people. And
Mhm.
that's when I'm like, it's interesting how I feel like they just spent the shows spent their time differently, and Peacemaker does a much better job at building up all of the characters and their relationships between each other.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think obviously I think there's an element that like HBO and Warner Brothers definitely wanted er, the Suicide Squad movie to like perform better than it ended up doing. Um, but like critically, it was incredibly well received, and by that point, they'd already basically shot the entirety of this series. I was like, well, we're gonna stick with it. James Gunn has obviously come out and talked about how like he wrote this series in quarantine, pretty much like convinced it wasn't actually going to get made, and then they got to make it. And yeah, he's kind of had free reign on it, and very much it is like, hey, like you have a crazy off the wall idea, go for it. We've lost control of this universe anyway, because now we've got like weird continuity things because we let the fucking Snyderverse cut thing happen. And so they're just like, whatever, it's all gonna get reset with Flashpoint anyway, and we also don't care because we let the Joker be a thing, and that worked wonders. And the Batman is going to exist
Yep.
outside of this, so it's just like, whatever, just have fun with our characters, go crazy, go nuts. So yeah, that's definitely a fascinating aspect of I think the series. And yeah, I think it is very much like James Gunn, like, well, I think he also very much loves what he's gotten to do with Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff, but he obviously does come from a little bit more of an extreme kind of mindset. So kind of getting to like untie his hands for these kind of couple projects is a ton of fun. But like in that same vein, like everything you're describing is what made Guardians of the Galaxy work so well, is like it was like getting this team of misfits to come together and giving you a reason to care for all of them. It's one of the great elements of the Suicide Squad movie, is like obviously like they have fun with kind of like completely demolishing and destroying one of the teams, but like another one of the teams, is a bunch of like just completely random people who hate each other at the beginning, but like end up kind of creating this whole family unit. So it's cool to see that that's continuing on again, and John Cena is getting to do the same thing with Peacemaker. Have another little fun group.
Yeah, and shout out to him too, because I think a lot of people might even have the same opinion. But in the last like couple years, now that I've been seeing him in more like mainstream stuff, because I never watched any of the stuff he did before, like Fast 9 or whatever, and then this and the Suicide Squad, and like I just want to give a shout out to him because I think he's actually a really good actor. Like he can do this like comedy, funny stuff. He could do the action, but especially in this version of Peacemaker, like he can really get in there and do some more like dramatic stuff and even just be really good at being like sad and upset. And like it's interesting to see some of those moments. And that's why I like huge shout out to him because like if he wasn't as good at it as an actor, I don't think the show would be as good. And obviously I'm talking about all of the elements make the show amazing, but he is obviously like a huge part of it. And I think
Mhm.
the fact that he is able to do the comedy, the action, and also these sad elements and just all these other different things like is actually really impressive. And like you think he does a great job.
Yeah, and I think, just going back to your Boba Fett comparison, I think, it sounds like obviously James Gunn had, like, kind of a singular idea and vision for what this story, what these 8 episodes are going to be, whereas I think, yeah, we saw with Jon Favreau and the Star Wars side of things, like, there was a part of that was, let's tell the story of Boba Fett as a crime boss on Tatooine, but then there was also, like, a part of it that was, let's also tell the story of, like, Boba Fett with Tuskens, and let's also tell a story of what the Mandalorian's up to, so we can kind of bridge the gap into the next season of that show, and I think that was like, it was having to do a lot more, like, juggling or spinning plates, and I don't know if it handled it incredibly well, and I mean, well, based on kind of the reception, I would say it did not handle it incredibly well, but I think this kind of like singular vision, singular idea behind Peacemaker seems to be serving it very, very well.
Definitely, and because I think that's also totally fair what you're saying about Boba Fett, because I realized that where it is somewhat apples to oranges, because like Boba Fett has so much more baggage tied to it than Peacemaker does, and Peacemaker can be a little bit freer. But it was just interesting to me to see how like going in, I thought these were going to be kind of somewhat similar type shows, even though I didn't think Boba Fett was going to be like violent. I just thought it was going to be like action and crazy stuff, and like him just being a badass the whole time. Like that's kind of what I expected. That's the same thing I expected for Peacemaker. Like he's going to be an asshole, he's going to be murderous, and he's going to go not follow the book and just be crazy and whatever. But it's just interesting to see how they actually tried to, I think, tackle a lot of the same ideas of like, here's a badass movie character we spent a little bit of time with that we only know a little bit about. Let's give you more about who they are and also look at them like grow and evolve and like how has these events make them impacted them and how are they going to grow and become a different person and how he's like with Peacemaker with Boba Fett, he doesn't want to be a bounty hunter anymore. He wants to be a daimyo, and he doesn't just want to be a murderer. He actually wants to be smarter about like getting into conflict and stuff. And with Peacemaker, you get this kind of interesting struggle where he starts to crumble and be like, I don't want to be Peacemaker anymore. And like, there's interesting to see these moments between him be like when he's Peacemaker and when he's Chris. And it's interesting how he's Peacemaker like 90% of the time, but when they choose to make him Chris, is always these really interesting moments. Like when he's wearing his civilian clothes, it's always a more like emotional scene. Like the first time he goes to talk to the dad, he's wearing emotional clothes, like or his normal clothes. He's not Peacemakered up with like his guard up. And then it's the same thing with like I'm not going to get into specifics about other scenes, but it's really interesting how I feel like they really selectively chose when to put him in the civilian clothes, and it always ties into something like more emotional. And then when he's Peacemaker, he's fully just in asshole mode, like and is just quipping and like has his guard up and is just like shooting people in the face and doing whatever. But like it, but that was my point there was just kind of like it's interesting that I think they wanted to make him more of an evolved character and also see how things have made him grow, which is also what I feel like they wanted to do kind of with Boba Fett. You know, it was like make him more than just like a bounty hunter dude. And so I was just interesting to me how I was like, man, I feel like Peacemaker succeeded in a lot more of like establishing a group and making me care about everybody and kind of what's going on. And then also just like making Peacemaker a great character that's actually like really well developed. And I think that's the thing. There's like things I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, but that's why there's things I could like point out, like, oh, this is what makes like me, like, this is why I feel this way. But it's like I don't want to spoil too much, especially if people out there are like interested to go check it out and
Mhm.
actually like experience some of the show.
Yeah, the people like you who've maybe been waiting for the whole thing to be out, and then they'll catch up and binge through the whole thing. It's also a fascinating thing, because it's like it's a weird one. Like maybe it's because I'm just not paying attention to it, or maybe it just has a very different audience or something like that. But like it was the kind of thing of like, oh, if I looked at anything on Twitter, a couple hours after the latest Book of Boba Fett episode came out, boom, it's like there's a ton of spoilers out there, and
Yep.
like trending hashtags and stuff are just completely ruining like surprises in that series, and And like I feel like I have no idea what's been going on the Peacemaker series on the flip side, despite being as online or whatever.
Yeah.
And like even the fact that I like I have James Gunn in my feed and he does a lot of like tweet alongs of that show. And I can still not have a clue really what's been happening on the series. So I don't know if it's just like like harder to spoil those kinds of things, or if it is just like it, or if it's just this element of like, because I'm not looking for it or because I don't know what I would be looking for, I'm just not seeing those things. But yeah, it's definitely a fascinating little thing. Or maybe it's just because it's like a more adult thing and has had fewer viewers than Star Wars. Who knows?
I think that that's fair because I know it's like we don't have the numbers, but I'm sure that like many more people got into Boba Fett and were watching Boba Fett than a lot of people probably didn't care about the Suicide Squad, and then even if they did, then now you have to care about Peacemaker and honestly, I think the TVMA thing that's why I part of why I love the show. But and I love that it's like different than what's out, and it reminds me of like The Boys and Invincible, but this is also doing like its own thing.
Hmm.
But I love that it's like MA and isn't like chained down by being like on Disney Plus
Yeah.
and but I think that would put a lot of people off to it. I'm sure that a lot of people wouldn't want to watch because also a lot of people probably without the discussion around it, I'm sure a lot of people probably just think it's Peacemaker being a murderous asshole and like just killing people, but it's actually like it ends up being a lot deeper. But to your other point too, I think it is somewhat harder to spoil because you can't ever really be like, oh, so and so's here, and that just kind of like is like a reveal because it's really more about like exploring the characters in the show. And there's like mild things you could be like, oh, this or this or this, but it's like I think some of it would just be more confusing if you haven't been following like the actual arc
Yeah.
when you're just like, oh, this happened to this guy, and you're like, that makes absolutely no sense. Like if I told you what just happened to a guy in episode 7 where you left off, you'd be like, that makes no sense
Yeah.
for like why that would happen.
Yeah.
But it's just it's an interesting thing. But I think you're definitely right because I never see really anybody reacting or talking about it too much.
It was funny you bring up because The Boys is another one of those like I've just stopped watching The Boys because it got so
Yeah.
like gruesome and violent and stuff, and I was just like I don't like this. But like Invincible, like I've already read all the Invincible series, so like I already kind of know where that story goes. And then the other part of it being like, oh, and it's in animated form, which like there's just a level of disconnect where I can deal with like gruesome violence in animation because even in that one like they do a lot more violence than necessarily like comes across on the page of the graphic novels and stuff. But it's still like there's enough of a disconnect I can like break from that reality, versus like again going back to like the Suicide Squad, like Pete Davidson's face getting like shot
Yeah.
off in the in the first 5 minutes of the movie or whatever. So it's like, nope, don't need to see that. And So yeah, it's a tricky balancing act that like yeah it I mean it's I imagine it loses audience members that would be interested in catching that story if it weren't for the level of over the top violence and stuff like that. But
But and that's why I think like Peacemaker, there is some in there, but I feel like it does it. I don't want to say it does it better, but it's interesting. Like it chooses its moments of like when to turn up the violence in like an action scene. And like The Boys is like way more violent of a show. Invincible also way more violent, but I get what you're saying too. If like Invincible's animated, so it's also a little bit easier. And but it's like those two. I think of like there's way more blood and just violence and people doing stuff than there is in Peacemaker. But the Peacemaker definitely does have a couple moments where there I can think of 2 or 3 where I'd be like, yeah, you would really probably not like these scenes or like these moments.
mhm.
But then it's interesting where I'm like, well, it is an hour an episode almost. And so out of 7 hours, if there's only a handful of scenes that really get violent, and then the rest is just a couple normal action scenes and then a lot of like character back and forth, it's like I was surprised. I expected it to just be like wall to wall, like if anything, more like the movie is,
Yeah.
because the movie definitely has like a lot more action and like you said, like Pete Davidson, and so far there hasn't been like anything like quite that extreme. Although there was definitely a guy that got hit in the face at one point, but his face was still there mostly.
Oh, mostly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I hope the finale works out and is a solid end to that story, because that's another element I feel like a lot of people have, especially on like a lot of the Disney Plus series and stuff. Like I think for the most case, people have been let down by the finale episodes.
Yeah.
So I hope kind of Peacemaker, as a similar show on a different verse kind of thing. I hope it bucks that trend. Cool. So I want to. So this is one of the things I would have talked about had I been on the show last week. But I just want to give a quick kind of impressions, thoughts on the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection. For those that don't know, this is basically the like PS5 remaster of Uncharted 4 and Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. I was originally gonna like skip it because I was like, I like those games, but not enough to like pay $40 or for them or whatever it was. And then I found out like, oh, actually, if you have either of those games and you just stick your disc in your PlayStation 5, you'll get the offer to like do a $10 upgrade for both. So it's like, okay, well that is fine. Like that I'm okay with, and sure, I'll pay that premium for the extra graphics and whatnot. Um, and I mean, like it's fascinating because like playing through the remaster of both those games, because I did play through or I did replay through both of them, was
Yeah.
very much like, like this looks like I remember it looking, and admittedly, these are only like 5-6 years old at this point, kind of thing.
They're
So
beautiful at the time.
exactly,
Like,
they
they
were
were, like,
beautiful games at the
outstanding.
time. So yeah, it's not like there was like it doesn't feel like there was a significant like increase or boost in it. And I'm never the person that's gonna like be able to catch 30 frames per second versus 60 frames per second, or like 4K versus 1080p or whatever. So it's just like, I don't like when it's like, do you want performance mode or blah blah blah? I'm like, I don't, just whatever you guys had as default, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Uh but games both still really hold up. I think are really really solid stories. For me, obviously, I think as such a fan of like the Nathan and Elena and Sully dynamic and relationships and stuff, like Uncharted 4 is such a wonderful kind of like pinnacle of their story. Um,
Definitely.
but I do think Lost Legacy, as kind of this side adventure with Chloe and Nadine kind of teaming up in there and having this kind of like adversarial relationship that kind of turns into friendship over the course of the game. Um, it also does the thing that you mentioned earlier, Miles Morales, or I guess that was probably before we started recording. But it does the Miles Morales type of thing where it is a significantly smaller adventure than Uncharted 4 was. So it makes it like more manageable and more like it's more bite size, and just like you can like it doesn't feel over designed or over like crafted. It is a more just like tighter story to enjoy.
Yeah.
um and so yeah, it was like a ton of fun hopping into both of those. And I was like, I was already planning on like replaying both of them anyway when I bit the bullet and just kind of decided to do this. But it was one of those things that, again, that we were talking about before we started recording, where um like they do the thing of, hey, if you like upload or if you import a PS4 save, you can use that save, and like they basically turn it into a PS5 save. And based on how many of them popped, I think it was supposed to like pop all of the trophies and stuff like that, but it did not pop nearly all of them for me. And that was when I started seeing like the, in my opinion, the biggest flaw of this package, which is twofold. One, two separate games that they made as one platinum trophy,
Yeah.
where like and in doing so, they made one of the trophies that you need to get, because they basically made like all the Lost Legacy trophies just like DLC trophies.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
like, okay, that's like its own list. Cool, fine. But they made one of the trophies that you need for the like Uncharted: A Thief's End like list, collect all of the trophies from Lost Legacy. So you can only get the platinum if you do everything from both games. Which was like extra frustrating. The fact that like not all of the trophies like migrated over, like it seemed, based on kind of what I was seeing on boards and stuff like that, it seemed like, oh, if you did some of these trophies as cleanup or something like that, kind of like we were talking with like Jedi Fallen Order, if you did all that stuff and then like didn't save or whatever, after getting the platinum trophy, then it's, then it didn't like carry over that progress. So there was a whole bunch of just like random things I had to do. Some of them were, simple things like that you can, pretty quickly cheese of like, oh, kill 10 stealth guys and kill, like do 10 stealth kills in a row or whatever. It's like, okay, I load up this checkpoint and I can do that. But then there were others where it was like, okay, you have to play through like these 3 chapters of the game without killing a person. And so it's like, okay, go to do that. I get to the end, the trophy doesn't pop. I'm like, okay, clearly, like I didn't kill somebody, but I guess they found me in combat at one point, and maybe like one of them blew up another like bad guy or something like that. So I had to like replay a section a couple times to try and like get those trophies. So there's like some like it was fine because it's whatever. Like those games are fun and stuff, but
Yeah.
it was one of those cases where like if if the trophy had worked, if the trophy import had worked as it was supposed to, this still would have been a bad experience because like in a world post your own freaking other Uncharted collection where you gave me 3 platinum trophies for the Nathan Drake collection for Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. You're only giving me 1 here, and it's one where now I have to effectively platinum both games, but you're only going to give me a gold trophy for platinuming everything from Lost Legacy, and then that gold is needed to platinum the Uncharted 4 trophy list. Like, this is annoying. So yeah, that was frustrating because the other like immediate thing I was thinking about was like friggin Mass Effect collection last year did the same.
Mm.
Like they not only did they like give you like
It's only
separate.
one list for Mass Effect,
No,
or does it give you 3
no, I'm saying yeah,
platinums?
Mass Effect the
Oh,
Legendary Edition was 3. They did an even better job because they took the trophy lists from the original 3 games and made them the trophy lists with 3 platinums, but they also took the Insanity trophy out of each of those lists and like put it in its own little like 4th like DLC trophy list that was like for the entire collection or whatever. And same with
yeah.
like kill X number of people across all 3 games. They took like a few trophies out, so I was able to get the platinums in all 3 of those games that I had not gotten in the past because I'd never dealt with the like Insanity difficulty playthrough. And so like it was like that's the lesson they should have learned, not this shit. Admittedly, like the difficulty trophies did pop for me automatically, so I didn't have to like go through and replay the game on crushing or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, like the games themselves are still fun, the stories are great, and there are even like fun elements that like I mean like I mentioned to Logan, minor spoilers for a a 6-year-old game or whatever, but Cassie at the end of the game, like this was the first time it dawned on me, oh, she's named Cassie because like Nate's mom was named Cassandra. Like, and
Oh, I
it's
never knew that.
exactly, it was very much the like, as stupid as it is portrayed in Batman v Superman, it was the Martha like, oh, I never put together that like both their names are Martha. And so yeah, this was kind of the same thing where it's like I like it clicked this time around. I was like, I feel like that's something that should have clicked for me last time, but it feels like a new memory. So either I've forgotten it in the 6 years since, or playing through it now and just being like, oh, I've connected those dots of like, oh, Cassie, short for Cassandra, named for Cassandra. Got it. Cool. Like that's a lovely little like connection to kind of the lineage of especially what's kind of like explored through that game. It's not especially I think it's something that would be easy to miss because it's not like you meet Cassandra in the game. You just kind of like hear about her and you like encounter her through like her past writings and stuff like that. But it is like young Sam and young Nate talk about her enough that it's like it stuck with me this time to be like, oh, Cassandra, Cassie, cool. And yeah, like it is with you and with Logan, it was the same kind of thing. Like, oh, I never I never put that together. So maybe it's just something we needed to have the Martha moment to like prepare our brains for that kind of insight.
For the
Um,
possibility that that could happen.
exactly. But yeah, like games are still great. It's like especially the tension and the moments between Nate and Elena in
Yeah.
Uncharted 4 still really like resonate with me really well, and I think like like there's so much weight to them that just makes it like, yep, really good storytelling. Um,
With that, I really love that in 4, they add those, like, additional conversations you can
mhm,
opt into where you have to do, like, the button presses, and then
mhm,
that also, like, made it for those, like, emotion in some of those deeper moments where, like, you're I always the thing I've never forgot about since that game came out is, like, when you're on the elevator with her and you can choose if you wanna talk to her or not,
mhm.
but that was to me, that's, like, such a moment of, like, "Hey, we gotta talk about this." Like, "We gotta talk about" but you cannot, like, you could
Yeah,
just sit there and stand in silence and have, like, a really awkward ride,
yeah.
like
It's you can have those, and like the game almost wants you to experience that awkward ride, because like even if you do those optional prompts, like the conversations are all very curt and short, and it's
yeah.
like Nate tries to crack a joke and Elena isn't having it, or like he brings up a thing and just like it's basically like a one sentence retort, and it is like, oh, they are clearly not on the same page. This is uncomfortable. This is more uncomfortable than if we had just ridden up this thing in silence almost. Um, because like she's not budging, nor should she.
Yeah, she's not wrong about, like, any of the
Yeah,
things that she's mad about.
yeah. So yeah, just like, really fun to revisit those, and like it was an interesting January because I like obviously for me there hasn't been like a ton of new things out that I've been eager to check out or anything. So so like revisiting some of those games. I guess like the one I did really like put some time into, the new one that we like I talked about a few weeks ago on the show, was Nobody Saves the World. Um, but like in that like gap between finishing that and Uncharted, or not Horizon Forbidden West this week. That's basically like that's the next one I've been waiting for. And I appreciate that I'm going to have a little bit of time to dive into that one, because I'm as of yet not on the Dying Light 2 train. I might still pick it up or something. Um, but then I'm also not going to be on the Elden Ring train. So like it's like, oh, I will have some time to enjoy Horizon Forbidden West. And in the meantime, rather than like what I did last year of like, let's hop into Yakuza, and like, because I could have been like, oh, now's time for me to go hop back into Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 or something like that. I was just like, I want to just kind of revisit some comfort food stuff. So hopping into these Uncharted games, and I'll talk in a little bit about kind of hopping back into Life is Strange, the original story as well, has been a nice, just like chill kind of. I can do these things while I'm focused on some other things, or I can kind of have focus on this while I'm watching an episode of Boba Fett or something like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
shout outs to the Uncharted games holding up, but immediately like, especially because I was playing this as I wrote up my like platinum rankings from last year. I was like, this immediately is going to be at the bottom of next year's platinum ranking list. The all the bullshit surrounding the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves platinum. It's like, that's like, you fucked me out of a platinum, and also you made me like do a whole bunch of stuff that I shouldn't have had to like redo. But whatever.
Was that, collection done in-house at Naughty Dog?
I
Do
believe
you
so.
know off the top of your head? Yeah, because that's interesting. Because I was just thinking, because we were talking when you were talking about the trophy list, I was thinking the Nathan Drake collection was Blue Point, and,
Mm,
they did the separate trophies for lists for each game like you should, and then also the new trophies they added for, like, the extreme difficulty or whatever was DLC, like, that was like a D you didn't need to do that for, the platinum, I don't think. I mean, that might have been Uncharted 4 actually. But it's like I was like, they did it right. Why did they mess it up? And then I was like, oh, that was Blue Point, the remaster geniuses. And
mhm.
I was like, it's interesting that Naughty Dog like didn't necessarily have the same thought process of like how to handle it or just copy like what Blue Point would have done, you know.
Yeah,
I guess
because
that my point is like it's interesting where Blue Point's expertise on the matter like comes in, if that makes sense.
it's I mean, this more than anything else like reinforced the idea that they always thought of Lost Legacy as DLC. And that was
Yes,
like
that's fair too.
that was
Yeah.
like the original thing, was like this was originally going to be a DLC story, and then it kind of grew out beyond the scope of that. And so they were like if you bought the DLC pack or whatever, then yeah, you're going to get this game. But also like this is a like we're going to sell this as a standalone, $40 game or whatever it was. Um, and in that regard, like, because obviously, there were in the original Uncharted 4 trophy list, there were like a few multiplayer ones, and since they didn't
Yeah.
carry over the multiplayer, I'm guessing that's why they were like, okay, well, let's have like a trophy to replace those multiplayer ones, and that will be the trophy for doing everything in Lost Legacy. And it's like, yeah, but fuck you. Maybe it was a, hey, like they know the numbers, and not enough people played Lost Legacy, and so they
Mm.
wanted to get people who were going to buy this collection to like commit to playing Lost Legacy as part of that story as well. But it's like that's also lame. Um, so yeah, that was disappointing, but whatever. It's still like it's fine. It's disappointing of my own making, because it's like I could have also just not given a shit about trophies at all, and just like been like, all right, I'm just gonna enjoy the stories, and there was like a brief period where I was like, all right, they didn't copy over all my trophies, fine, I'm just gonna play the stories and just gonna do that. And then I was like, no, I fucking want to. I need to have those 100%ed on my own list, so fine, I'll fucking do it again. But anyway, that was Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, and like if I would say the place this is most worthwhile for people would be if they only played one of those games, and still have that original copy, like do the upgrade thing and check out the other game, because like they're both really solid things.
Oh yeah.
um uh but yeah, like if you already played them, you probably don't need to revisit them, even if it's only $10. It's like you're probably fine just kind of like being like, all right, those were some fun memories. Or you can just replay them on PS4, or using the PS4 version on your PS5. Or actually, like, well, the Uncharted 4 I think is in like the PlayStation Plus collection or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So
it
yeah, you can
is.
just play it there. And enjoy that story. Like, and you're not going to be missing out too much on like graphical nuances or whatever. So, but yeah,
I'm kind of with you on that because, like, I'm somebody who loves all the Uncharted games and even those two included. I just don't really feel like going back, especially since the fact that it's like just a either graphical or like performance upgrade. Which to me, I was like, the game was already beautiful and it already ran great. I never had a frame rate problem. I never had it. I maybe it crashed at some point, but it's like Naughty Dog makes great games. So I was like, I love the fact that they went in and like boosted it up. It's just this is one for me where like Ghost of Tsushima, I was ready to dive into, but this is one for me where I'm like, I don't really need to dive into it. And maybe I would have, if honestly, if the trophy list wasn't all jacked up like you were talking about, and I had heard other people talk about how it was kind of slammed into one list, and I hadn't heard some of the exact things like we just kind of ran through, but I was like, nah, I'm good.
yeah,
Like I don't think if this became free on like PS Plus or they put it in the PlayStation collection or something, which they might do way in the future, I would maybe check it out. But I don't even with this small upgrade. I don't think I would do it personally, but to your point, if nobody has played these games, or if you had played one or the other, I would definitely recommend it then.
yeah. So let's throw it back over to you, because you hopped back into some Assassin's Creed Valhalla recently for the kind of the new like added quests they added, what was it, like a month or two back, with Cassandra crossing over, Cassandra from Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So tell us about your experience there.
Yeah, so yeah, I went back to Assassin's Creed Valhalla this time on the PS5 version. I kind of transferred my save over and just kind of jumped into my end game world where I had already like finished the story and did a bunch of stuff. I never got the platinum, but I still did a bunch of stuff in there. Um,
Speaking of the platinum, that is the bottom of my list from this year. That was the Assassin's Creed Valhalla one, yeah, or from
it's
from
not a
2021. It's a
it's
shitty,
not a
shitty
great
platinum.
platinum.
No, it's a shitty
Yeah.
platinum, and the immediate reason it went to the bottom of the list was because the game was so bugged at launch that I had to wait for 2 months before I could even get the 100% completion thing, because I was like locked out of a few of those quests. I couldn't finish them because of bugs and shit. So
Well, and even going back to that, I had played the game at launch as well, and I did run into some bugs and stuff. And one of the ones was even during the holiday event they did, like the Yule Festival. I think I talked about it on one of the shows, I believe, but like one of the quests that they load for that was totally bugged and I couldn't complete it. Like the quest marker was on the wrong part of the map. It was telling me to go to the wrong place. And then I think something like fell through the map and just like jacked up the whole quest. I couldn't complete it. Um, and then, so that was last year, and that was the last time I had played Valhalla. I put it down in January of 2021. So coming back in January of 2022, the Yule Festival was happening again, and all of the quests had refreshed. And I was like, I wonder if they fixed that one quest. Should I go do the beer quest? Like, I didn't because I did all the Yule quests. I didn't want to do them again because they were the same. But that was one where I was like, maybe I should go actually finish the beer one that glitched out on me.
Mhm.
And to your point though, I don't know if you've checked it out at all or even just uploaded your save to get the trophies, but it
I
seems like it.
originally played it on PS5 already, so like
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
so
yeah.
all of mine are already the PS5 version. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I was on PS4 originally, and then now that I have a PS5, I kind of you get the free upgrade. I move my save over, and it also does some funky stuff with the trophies, which everybody online, I even looked that up ahead of time. People were saying you don't get trophies at all because each version handles its own list, basically. But as soon as I loaded it in, I started getting a bunch of trophies because it recognizes that I've done things like, oh, you already completed the whole map or whatever, or you did this quest or this whatever. Like it recognizes, but there's some that it didn't pop and there's nothing I can do to get it to recognize that I did that. Like the upgrade your camp to level 6, that's the max upgrade. I can't upgrade the camp anymore, so there's no way for me to get the game to recognize that my camp is level 6.
Mhm.
So and also same thing of do your first raid in England, which is a trophy that like 70% of people have. I've completed the game and I haven't raided in England apparently.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those, and I would have to start a new campaign to do that because I did all of the raids my first time through because I liked raiding. And that luckily is only like an hour or two in, maybe 3, but it's like the upgrading your camp is like 80 hours into the game.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm never gonna get those trophies, and I'm never gonna get the platinum for this version either. But to going back to the other point, like it seems like it runs a lot better, and obviously maybe that's me going PS4 to PS5, but like it seemed like it ran good. The load times were definitely a lot better, and that was where I was like, this is sweet because I can fast travel around and I don't have to sit here for 45 seconds. Like,
Mhm.
um, and but it was going into the Cassandra DLC specifically, it was cool because they've added like a new island area, so it's cool to see them be adding more like continents or like hubs of like the world maps, kind of how you had like England and Norway and then Vinland. You also now have like this, I forget what the new one is, but then I think if you buy the other DLC, I think there's even more
Yeah, there's
like
probably
places
like
you
an
can go.
Ireland or whatever, because yeah, like one of them is it's a Dublin based DLC or something like that.
Yeah, and I forget where the island for this one takes place, but it is like a new map. That's like it's not gigantic, but it is cool that you get to like do the thing where it's like, hey, there's a new person at the docks, and when you want to go do that quest, go talk to them, and they'll take you to this island. And that's when the whole quest takes place on that island, and it's really cool where they kind of introduce Cassandra almost like immediately, where yeah, you're kind of playing as Ivor, and you show up and you start investigating, and people have been like freaking out on this island recently, basically. And when she shows up and you kind of have your square off with her because you like both kind of think you're bad guys and kind of like fight, and then they kind of end up with that like, hey, let's work together to solve the mystery here. And it's like a cool like, it's not necessarily like buddy cop, but it's cool to see like a lot of the cutscenes with like Cassandra and Ivor working together to solve the same problem, and then see the little bits of like that relationship grow. Because even kind of like they start off fighting in like a literal fight, but then she sees the hidden blade or he tries to use it at some point, and then that's when she's like, okay, he might be okay then, right? Like it's like the symbol of like she's like, oh, I can trust him, and then Ivor will like Ivor the whole time is like, I have no idea who you are, I don't trust you, like please, I like let me deal with this myself, like you can leave. Like so, and it's just funny to see that dynamic of like definitely like her being like we know everything about Cassandra from having played Odyssey, and we know she's like, oh, I'm not going to spoil Odyssey, I guess, but it's like we know all these great things about her, and to me, I love her, and I think she's such a badass. And it's funny to see Ivor be like, no, I'll handle this, please leave. And I'm like, Ivor, check yourself, like you don't know who you're talking to right now.
Mhm.
But and then it's also there's even like they even get into like timeline and funny joke stuff that's also like really funny, and like he doesn't like he at some point I think they talk about he's like, how old are you, like, or like how do you know that or whatever, and she's just like, oh, I've been around. Like it's just like all these like funny jokey moments. But it's a really short like little thing. It's only like an hour and 90 minutes maybe, and if you there's more side stuff to do on the island, like, you can just go around and explore and get viewpoints and do stuff, but I probably only spent, like, an hour or 2 there, and once you wrap up the Cassandra quest, that's pretty much it, and then I don't know, I don't even know if I should, because I wasn't gonna spoil the exact ending, but it's kinda that thing of like, "Okay, cool, now we go our separate ways." And so it really is just like they made a quest line, and that quest line really just kinda, like, begins and ends on that island, so I was a little bit disappointed it didn't, like, turn into something more, but I think that's their angle. I think this is just kind of this setup for something that'll keep being more. And
Hmm.
then part of what we had kind of realized before we got in here, or what I didn't realize, is that there's also Odyssey DLC that kind of sets up the story and kind of gets her to the point where she is at.
Hmm.
And now I'll probably go download Odyssey tonight after this. And I don't know if I'll play it tonight, but I'll download it and get it installed and be ready to go. Cause like I love Odyssey. I have the platinum in that and all the DLC trophies. Like I literally have the 100%. And I'm like, I love Odyssey so much, and Cassandra's amazing. And that's why when they're like, Cassandra's back, I'm like, great, you got me. I'm back in Valhalla. Like,
Yeah, it's fascinating. Again, like just another comparison to Boba Fett. It's like the idea is almost Boba Fett showing up in the Mandalorian is akin to, the quest starting in Odyssey or something, and then it continues on into the Book of Boba Fett show, i.e. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and then the Mandalorian slash Cassandra shows up in this to kind of be like, okay, like we're teaming up for this little bit, and then we're done. Now we're gonna go our separate ways again. Yeah, it's like I very much I'm happy to never hop back into Assassin's Creed Valhalla again after my previous frustrations and the amount of time I put into that game already. Um, but I do appreciate that for the people that do, love those kinds of games that much more, that they are, I mean, like that they're continuing to support them, especially like the idea that they're adding new stuff to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, all these years later and stuff. It's
it's a
you know,
four-year-old game at this point.
exactly, yeah. It's like, okay, that's cool that like you're putting stuff into that also ties into this thing. And it's like obviously like there's an element, a very cynical element of like if somebody was like really all in on Assassin's Creed Odyssey and now needs to play Valhalla to like see how that story wraps up or something like that, and otherwise hadn't, it's like, well, they're going to be very disappointed by how little Cassandra is actually in that game, maybe. But it's still cool, like the idea of crossing over. I think I've been seeing like rumored leaks that like there's going to be kind of a standalone thing this year that'll be like
Basim,
Basim's
the
yeah,
yeah.
like a Basim centric story, whether that's a Lost Legacy size kind of adventure, or if it's extended DLC or something like that. I don't know, but like it's I do appreciate, like, one of the elements I do actually like really like about the Assassin's Creed series is the crossing over of storylines and narratives and stuff like that. Like I the first one I ever really got into was Assassin's Creed 4. And so finding
Mhm.
out after the fact like how that tied into like how other Kenways tied into the story, and then going back and kind of seeing some of that stuff. Or even in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, going to Vinland and seeing stuff that would eventually play out in Assassin's Creed 3 or something like that, was like being set up, was a cool little like feel and vibe and stuff like that. Or even how they tie elements back to like the Desmond storyline in
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I thought like as much as like there is a whole facet of people that don't care about any of that stuff at all. I
Yeah.
like it. That's one of those few places where I'm like, it's where my like inner Cameron kind of comes
Yeah,
out, where
yeah.
like I'm like, I really like the lore of this stuff. I definitely don't know it as deeply as Cameron would, I'm sure, but like it's really cool seeing those elements, or I will see something play out. I'm like, I feel like that's a tie to another game. Let me like Google it and look it up, and sure enough, like I'll see a Game Rant article about like, here's what this thing really means or whatever, and I'm like, cool, thank you for having that clickbait article ready for me to hop
Yeah.
in and enjoy. Um,
I'm with you there because I've always loved the lore of these games, and I've been playing since the first one. Like literally, The series I think does kind of mean a lot to me, even though I know a lot of people like to shit on it. But it's like I literally saw the E3 demo for the first one before it was ever released, and I blew my mind that you could just climb on whatever. Because
Mhm.
I it's such a vivid thing to me of remembering like PS2 games and you even going up to like a wall of tape or just even a hedge, or like it's like the Pokemon joke of like you should be able to get over this. And
Mhm.
even the Batman thing where he's like, no, I can't go through there, and there's just like police tape,
Mhm.
and it's just like it's just all the memes of like the ways people would be able to like make their world small and condensed. And that was really their showcase for the first one, was like you can climb on anything and you can grab that windowsill and then climb onto the top of the roof and then jump over to the other building. And like at the time it blew my mind. And then playing the actual games, there is like all this crazy lore, and it's like the future and the past and how it ties together. And like the first couple games had so much cool interesting lore and stuff. And I know they eventually kind of decided like, hey, I think a lot of people don't play all the games or like can't follow this insane story like I was, where I was like actually invested in this modern day story with Desmond. Um and but it is interesting that now I feel like they're kind of almost being like, hey, what if we brought some of those elements back? Like
Yeah.
hey, we really went into the historic side, which I think was is still super cool. But now it's like, hey, what if we brought some of the Isu and timeline weird stuff? And then now that I like that they have this interesting kind of timeline they're playing with, where it's like, oh, we can make games connect to other games, where before it was just Desmond and how does he relate to these people, and then the Kenways and kind of like how do they relate to Desmond and then also each other. And like it's just interesting that now with like the ways that Valhalla introduces different things and kind of brings back a new modern day story and tries to bring in more intrigue. And that's why like if they were to do a Basim game, I think that would be really interesting, because I think there's still more to do with like him and like that part of the angle of the story, especially if it continues where Valhalla left off.
Mhm.
But I like, and also what I had heard about it too is it's supposed to be like a smaller kind of thing, and that's what I really love to hear, is because Valhalla is way too big,
Yeah.
and Valhalla is downscaled from Odyssey, and then Valhalla is still way too big, and it's just like
Like Valhalla is downscaled in that it is a, yes, technically it is a smaller world, but it is so much more of a compact world.
yeah,
Like, I mean, like I put way more time into 100%ing Valhalla than I did into 100%ing Odyssey, because so much of Odyssey is just open seas. Like
yeah,
there isn't shit to do. Like yes, the map is giant, but if I'm just fast traveling from like one island to another, it's basically like there's nothing there in between. So like yes, technically the world map of Odyssey is bigger, but it is filled with so much more empty space compared to Valhalla, which was just like, okay, there's just way too much shit in this game,
yeah.
um, to like unless they start like diving into smaller experiences. Yeah, I will probably start like ducking out and being like, all right, I'm not gonna try and platinum this, or but like but it's like they have you over a barrel almost,
Yeah.
because there is an element of like as they're adding in kind of those other story elements and stuff that they like, they're adding them in as like completely separate side quest lines and kind of stuff. So you like you can go through this story without like getting a lot of those elements, and just kind of play through Ivor's story or whatever. But if you do all of these extra other things, you like start to see, oh, this is how this ties together to that other thing in like really cool and interesting ways, that it is that like you're only going to get the full picture if you do everything. It's like, I don't want to fucking have to do everything every one of these games, cuz that's a lot of time. But yeah.
That was me with, not to get onto like a tangent, but with Assassin's Creed 2, if you got all of the hidden glyphs, you got like a 30-second video of what were Adam and Eve jumping off of a building,
Yeah.
which eventually meant nothing because they changed the storyline they were going with. So, but it's a thing of like I did so much work to get that 30-second cutscene that eventually years later meant nothing. But that's why I'm like, it's interesting to still see them kind of almost continue that forward. But now the game's not, instead of it being 20 hours, it's like 150.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh God, like I think it is. I think Valhalla was too bloated and too much. I liked the fact that the world map, like we were saying, was a little bit smaller, and I like that the things, a lot of times the things there were to do were more like crafted than it just being a chest you had to find and open like other Assassin's Creeds, where it's just, hey, we put chests everywhere. There's
Yeah.
500 of them. Go clear all the
Yeah.
icons. At least in this, it was like, oh, this is
Fucking
like a
Unity was
puzzle. And
Unity was the worst.
that was what I was going to bring up, because that's when it peaked for me of like actually hating it, where I was like, Unity was, Black Flag was really bloated, and then Unity was like awful with just markers all over the map, and then like, oh, you can only open this treasure chest if you're in co-op, and you need to be level whatever on UB Club to open this and I'm like, fuck all of this,
Yeah.
like. And then Valhalla, like, but to me, my point, I guess, there was Valhalla stepping back into that territory, and I do not like that. And if
Mhm.
anything, it's even worse because it takes way longer to do all that shit.
Yeah. I like I will say, like, story-wise, I appreciate that Valhalla effectively took, like, more of an episodic, like, season of television approach in that,
Yeah,
like, each
yeah,
of the territories you go through and kind of do is just its own, like, episode of TV or something like that. And
yeah.
some of them, like, tie into the larger, season kinda thing, but it was much more like this is like a CBS procedural or something like that, where, 5 episodes of this entire series will tie into, like, the big story along arc that will kind of, like, pepper back in throughout, but then a whole bunch of this other stuff is just monster of the week or whatever, and just go do this thing, go figure out how to help this, village or something like that. So, like, there was an element of, like, I appreciate that, but it also made it feel like it was almost less rewarding in terms of, like, the big picture story stuff, because there wasn't, like, just a one singular through line that I was following. Um, but yeah,
And even because the way it does that, the ending left me wanting a little bit, and not even like the way the story ends, I was fine with. It's just the way the presentation is there.
mhm,
I literally had the moment where I was confused if I had finished the game or not.
yeah,
And I like, because it also doesn't go to the credits when you beat the game. Like, that's just an off thing in the menu you can go to do if you feel inclined. So I literally like, because like I can't just get, I don't want to get into specific spoilers, but it was literally just left me a moment of like, did I finish the game? Is
is
that
it,
it? And then it's
are
like,
we
I looked
done?
online and it's like that's it.
Yep,
And it's like, come back for DLC. And I'm just like, all right, fuck you guys.
yeah, yeah. um well, I'm glad you at least had some fun with the Cassandra stuff, and if you do hop back into Odyssey and check out kind of the new Cassandra quests there, let me know. But yeah, we will wrap up then with some Life is Strange remastered thoughts. Remind me, Frank, have you played through the Life is Strange stuff?
Yeah, I played through the first Life is Strange game. I watched somebody play it on Twitch before I played it, and then I played it at some point when it was on PS4, like in like 2016.
Okay.
And I know, and so I definitely know the whole story and everything. And I'm not like the hugest fan of it, but I definitely I know like you and I think even Logan are like huge fans.
Yeah, I mean my history with it that I talk about a little bit in the Let's Play series is I did not play it as it was coming out in 2015, I believe is when it was basically coming out episodically. Um and then 2016 I suddenly had a little bit of free time on my hands because of a breakup. And so I had like enough people had like sung its praises in game of the year time that I was like, okay, I'm gonna like let me check out this game now. And I basically did. I played like an episode a night, and this was during like peak Trevor Trove days where I was like writing and publishing an article every day on Trevor Trove. And so like one week it was just like I would play an episode and then I would write up my thoughts on that episode and do that like every night for the week. And then I did like I capped it off with like a here's my it was basically like a here's a review of every episode and then here's a review of the entire series. Um and this is all like basically February of 2016, so almost like 6 years to the day, effectively, from when when I finished up Life is Strange Remastered. Here today as we were recording this, um, and it's fascinating how like it's a just a fascinating blend of sort of remembering things from that original playthrough to having much more recently played through Before the Storm and having like elements of that game that is a prequel to this kind of like color and things, and then like playing through this and being like, oh, like this this doesn't tie to what they set up in Before the Storm at all. And so there are a few elements that are complete like George Lucas prequel continuity stuff of like you made a problem you didn't have to make in the Before the Storm prequel stuff. Um, but like that aside, there's still like cool elements and like getting to like examine more, I think, the themes that I know will become like a larger part of the story in later episodes and stuff like that, like seeing those kind of like set up and peppered in those early episodes, knowing where the story is going to go, I think made it a very interesting playthrough for me this time. And it kind of like just even like recontextualizes like the entirety of that story for me in terms of like this is a this is a story about, you know, about grief, obviously, in many ways, many forms, and just seeing how that kind of like plays out and is introduced like right out the gate.
Mm.
The idea that like you walk into the bathroom, and you see this girl get shot, and you don't even realize in that moment, Chloe or Max doesn't even realize in that moment that it's her best friend from years ago, Chloe. Like she, like when she kind of like snaps back into like the classroom or whatever, and has this new power where she can rewind time. She talks about like, I need to get to the bathroom to save that girl from getting shot. She doesn't say to save Chloe from getting shot, to save my, you know, former best friend from getting shot. And so it's this weird idea of like giving Max this opportunity to like reconnect with a friend that, if, you know, this time power had not been like introduced into her life, would have just been like a tragic, like two ships passing in the night kind of thing. Like she's been back in town for a month, but has not reached back out to her former best friend Chloe to hang out. And like Chloe effectively can die before that happens. And so like the whole story then ends up being like giving Max like a week to, you know, to reconnect with that friend, to spend time and get that like relationship rebuilt. Because she's been absent for 5 years, she moved away and didn't stay in touch, and Chloe has gone through all this other shit that, you know, some of it is explored in this game, some of it is explored in Before the Storm. And it's just a fascinating, like seeing it through that lens and knowing again where the story will play out. It was a fascinating kind of like re like opportunity to replay and kind of like recontextualize elements of the story for me. That said, like the remaster aspect of the game overall, mostly good. Like it does. Life is Strange True Colors was a significant step up in terms of like how good a Life is Strange game looks. Um, this does not have True Colors level of like quality. It's still like they you know touched up these characters here and there, but it's still a 2015 2016 era like core underneath.
By
um
like a small indie studio,
yeah,
you know, so it's not even like a giant AAA game. Like we were talking about Naughty Dog and like
yeah.
Uncharted 4 that came out a year later.
um some of the like, but then there were like, there would just be random things where it's like, oh, something didn't translate well in the remaster, where like, you know, Max would be sitting there in a scene and like her character model would be flickering all over the place kind of thing. Or she'd just kind of be like vibrating up and down a little bit or something like it's like, oh, something is amiss right now in the remaster aspect of the game. Lighting, as I feel like a lot of the lighting stuff in the Grand Theft Auto remaster recently, it was terrible. Like there was just a lot, it was a dark game. And there were a lot of things where it's just like, I can't see what I'm supposed to be seeing right now because everything is so dark and because there isn't like ambient light here in the Unreal Engine or whatever. And then most notably, the thing I think I call out the most over the course of my Let's Plays is like, I think pretty much each episode ends with a like, this is a scene that we've put a lot of time and resources into and isn't really going to be impacted by the choices that you've made. So this is like a full-blown cutscene of these characters. And while in many cases those look better, they're also completely missing subtitles throughout, like compared to the rest of the game. So like, you know, the end of episode 1 when like Chloe and Max are seeing like, you know, the you know the you know the are freaking out on the lighthouse or something like that, or out by the lighthouse, and kind of having a talk or something like that. Whole thing is happening and just the subtitles have dropped out completely. And it was like from an accessibility standpoint, it's like, why is it missing from those? Like that's like, that was just, I hope that gets patched in and fixed. Just and like I'm always also hyper aware of it because when I'm doing my Let's Plays, I always have like web captioner going on, so it's captioning what I'm saying to the best of its ability. So like I'm trying to be accessible in that regard, for our hard of hearing friends out there. Um, and so when the game doesn't play along, and just suddenly also isn't like, is just dropped out, it's like, that's disappointing and frustrating. So it was weird just to see it like clearly be in the like pre-rendered cutscenes where the subtitles dropped out. Um, but other than that, like, solid experience overall. Again, it's a great story, like fascinating characters. I definitely had more fun shitting on the characters that I do not like in that, this time around, and absolutely being like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make fun of this person because this person sucks. Fuck this person. Um, and kind of like playing around with those ideas. Seeing the how the stats play out at the end. There were a few where I was like, wow, like way more people sided with that character than I thought should have. A few of those kinds of moments throughout, but all in all, it's Life is Strange. Still a real good game. Like I hopped back into it because playing through Before the Storm recently was like, I kind of want to see what that story, like I kind of want to go back and see what that story between Max and Chloe was like. What if my opinions on it change these years later or something like that. Um, it's still a really good story. I think it does have some, some shortcomings, that don't hold up as well as I would like. But at the same time, it's like that game laid the groundwork for what would eventually do Life is Strange 2, and then more recently Life is Strange True Colors. Um, Both of which I think might like more than this story, just because I can I find myself connecting to certain characters and certain elements of those stories more so than I connected to Max's story. Like in this in particular, I was like, there's a lot of stuff where I was thinking to myself repeatedly, like, wow, Max is really pretentious. I don't think I would be friends with Max. Like
That's kind of
I wouldn't hate Max, but like also I don't want to hang out with you, Max. You are a hipster, which a lot of people kind of call her out on. uh, yeah. What were you saying?
I'm kind of with you there, and that's almost like one of the things that kind of holds the game back a little bit for me is because I don't really like Max or Chloe.
Hmm.
Like I like Chloe maybe a little bit more, but that's also just my kind of person. Like I probably would get along with her in real life. We would probably hang out. I know many people similar to her,
Hmm.
but it's like it's that thing of like yeah, like especially when you have Max as a protagonist, I don't think she's like bad or awful. Like I don't think the game is bad. It's just I just doesn't hit the level for me that it hit for I think that it did for other people. And I think for me that is one of the things. It is like some of the main characters I don't really vibe with, and one of the things I've thought about over the years is like when I've talked to some people who were like older, everybody really loves Life is Strange. And when I've talked to people who are younger and like more my age, who were closer to like the characters' age,
Hmm.
we're like, no, we do not like these characters, and we do not like this game very much. And
Yeah.
it was interesting how like multiple people I've talked to who were like in them similar to age range to me, like Barrett Courtney, like me and Barrett are like very similar on the game. And I thought it was interesting how we'll be like, there's things where we'll be like, nobody talks like this and like nobody does this. And
Yeah.
like it's just a weird kind of like a thing.
It is very much a how do you do, fellow kids kind of vibe, where it's like, oh, this game was clearly written by 30 somethings who are not doing the best job embodying 18-year-olds for this dialogue and for these conversations with one another. And and that's another thing. Like I think as the games have gone on, they've gotten a much better feel and understanding of the writing, and this one was their first one out the gate, kind of
Yeah.
trying this storytelling approach. And yeah, it is a very like, oh, like a lot of the choices you guys are making are not what I would say or what anybody would say in this situation. Or there would be things where I was like the lack of options in certain places of like, I'm looking for something in, Nathan Prescott's room. I've hated Nathan Prescott this entire story. Let me do something in his room to fuck up his room or something like that. And the fact that they don't give you that option or something like that, it's just like, well, that's disappointing that you didn't you didn't anticipate me wanting to like, kind of get a little sense of revenge on this character or something in this moment, and didn't give me that opportunity. So there's definitely missed opportunities. But again, I think seeing where the series has grown from there, I think like I I appreciate that Life is Strange 1 had to walk before Life is Strange True Colors could run kind of vibes. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the remaster. Mostly a solid, but yeah, there are definitely a few like little graphical hiccups here and there. And also like I'll just kind of speak to one of the other, I think, key elements that a lot of people touch on a lot of times with Life is Strange is like the music. And this one
Mhm.
is very like, oh, look at how emo and like indie we can be. And I'm just like, I don't like none of this does anything for me because I don't care about the music that much. And it's so there are a couple times where I'm like, oh, and here's where this video is going to get DMCA'd. um,
Yep.
or basically here's where it's gonna not let us monetize this video. Not that we can monetize our videos anyway, but here's where I'm gonna get the warning on YouTube of like blah blah blah. And sure enough, like they're like all of the videos have that kind of thing. One of them has like a hey, because of this song, your video can't be viewed in like Papua New Guinea and France and a handful of other places. I'm like, well, sorry to our our audience that may be in those places. They're gonna, I guess, have to hop onto a VPN or something and trick YouTube.
Yep.
Because yeah, I was like, there have been a couple things where it's like, okay, I can like delete out the song or something, but it's like, nah, there are other places where it's just like it's not gonna make any sense or it's not gonna be worthwhile to try and do that. So,
It's
um,
a shame with that remaster, they didn't build in, like, the streamer mode or,
yeah,
that I see in, like, some games or even, like, Guardians of the Galaxy had where you could just turn off all the music just so you can just get the story.
yeah. I even checked for that, and especially because, yeah, like, True Colors has that, like, it's really silly because you'll see characters kind of, like, thrashing around or something, and it's just silent, but it like, they at least did put those kinds of ideas especially because like, so many of the music things in Life is Strange, or the original one, is just like, "Hey, we're just setting the mood for this episode." So it's like there's not you're not even doing anything. It's just kind of like, here's we're playing this music while a lot of like, setting the scene kind of like shots are happening or whatever. And so it's like, well, I can't do anything with this anyway. I can't just skip through this anyway. So yeah, it's irksome, but it's whatever. Life is Strange, still a really good game, but I would certainly recommend people check out True Colors more than maybe hopping back in. Like, I checked this out because I bought the True Colors like extended edition or whatever it was, deluxe edition, which came with this remaster automatically included as like it was basically like a multiple pack kind of thing. So like I got this and the Before the Storm remaster without like dropping another $40 on it or whatever. And so I was like, cool, I will hop back in and check out Max and Chloe's story, and see how that holds up. And figure out figure, hey, it gives me 2.5 weeks of let's plays to do. So boom, now I'm a couple weeks ahead and can spend time instead preparing for Horizon Forbidden West. So yeah, that is my Life is Strange remastered thoughts. Check out our the Let's Play series, where I've been playing through. I have been and will continue to play through every episode on our YouTube, youtube.com/that nerdy site. And you can also check out, because I migrated everything from Trevor Trove over, you can check out like my original kind of like day by day reviews and overall review of Life is Strange, which I linked in those posts as well. So yeah, you can go check out our Life is Strange remaster, to see what silly decisions I make in that game. All right. I think that is about gonna do it. Any final thoughts from you there, Frank, before we wrap up?
No. No, I think that's pretty much it for me.
All right. So yeah, that's gonna do it. Thank you, Frank, for joining me. Let's go around our metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to something you mentioned earlier in the video, but my Game of the Year 2021 video version should be live. If it's not already live at the time you're listening to this, it should be live sometime soon after. The written version has been up on the site for a bit, but this is just kind of my video breakdown with me narrating it. If anyone wants to go check that out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Solid work from our at this point pretty much sole video editor, Frank. Great work, kind of giving a little rundown of your top games from last year with some video accompaniment. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, in addition to the Life is Strange shoutouts, as well as all the other shoutouts we gave kind of early on. Let's give a shout out to That D Plus show. Go check out that D Plus show. We talked obviously a lot about it in other elements of this show, but our last episode of that D Plus show was our basically full rundown of the season of Book of Boba Fett. So you can go check out all of our thoughts on the full season now that that is all done. And so yeah, stay tuned for more from that, as well as all of our other podcasts. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site and check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.